I should see what episode this is going to be.
10.
10. Easy.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Who got the truth now? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Sit me down, say it straight. Another story on the way. Who got the truth?
Welcome to episode 10 of Acquired, the podcast where we talk about technology acquisitions that actually went well. I am Ben Gilbert.
I'm David Rosenthal.
And we are your hosts. Today, we come to you with an acquisition that is actually not a technology acquisition, but something that David and I were inclined to talk about anyway, because we both sort of have a little romantic fascination with anything involving airplanes, and this is particularly interesting. Today we're going to be talking about Alaska Airlines acquiring Virgin America right here in our own backyard in Seattle. Before we get into the acquisition history and facts, wanted to remind you that you can sign up now at Acquired FM to get our episodes delivered via email. We also would really appreciate it if you could rate us on iTunes. It'll help us grow the show and expand what we can do with it, from productions to new topics and guests.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to talk about a new partner of ours here on Acquired, Legora, the agentic operating system that is redefining how the world's best legal teams work.
Yep, it's sort of obvious that AI is going to completely change the legal industry. I bet most of you listening have dropped a contract into some sort of AI chatbot out there. Legora took that insight and asked the question, what if you really built something with that power from the ground up for the legal industry?
So the founders did exactly what great founders do: operate with obsessive customer focus. They embedded inside a massive law firm for months. They sat with the lawyers just watching how the work really gets done.
And that's how you get features that customers love, like tabular review, where you drop in a folder of hundreds of contracts and it pulls every key term into a grid a lawyer can actually work with. Legora's bet here is interesting. Since it lets each lawyer handle more complexity, any given person can increase the quality of their work and do higher value work. And this means that the pie can grow even as each individual task takes less time.
And they recently launched Legora Agent, offering greater intelligence and performance. The agent lets lawyers set an objective. Then it can handle the planning and the execution and delivery of the final product. Legal teams get to maintain full control and transparency, since they're still involved where judgment is required.
And Legora works where you already work. You can use it within Microsoft Word while redlining or drafting. The early Legora numbers essentially speak for themselves. When they have a head-to-head pilot with their top competitor, they win 70% of the time. Legora now has over 100,000 lawyers on the platform from 1,200 legal teams in 50 countries. And crazily, they went from 1 million to 100 million in ARR in about 18 months.
Truly insane numbers. And that is the real test. Plenty of things demo well, but the question is whether a busy associate actually reaches for it during crunch time, or whether a partner trusts it before going into a conversation with a major client. If your legal team wants to check it out, whether you're a law firm or you're in-house at a company, you can learn more at legora.com/acquired, and just tell them that Ben and David sent you.
Now, with that out of the way, David, you want to dive into acquisition history and facts?
Indeed. Yeah, this will be a fun one. Listeners, let us know what you think. Don't worry, we're not changing the topic of the show, but we thought we'd have some fun and analyze a very different industry than technology.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that, it's not a tech acquisition. There is technology involved, but the way we're kind of breaking the mold on this one too is this just happened last month.
Yep.
It's not like, or this month actually.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, so this is something where it's going to be highly speculative, but I think it's going to be a fun ride.
All right, with that, so Virgin America was actually founded in 2004 by Richard Branson, and then had to go through a whole series of machinations to end up finally launching their airline service in the U.S. Not until 2007. And over those 3 years, a whole bunch of things happened. So one, it turns out that due to some crazy laws, U.S. domestic airlines cannot be owned cannot have foreign ownership greater than 25% of the company.
Crazy.
So Branson and Virgin had to basically sell off 75% of the company before they could even have a hope of operating.
It's wild. And I think at that point when they were first starting, it was Virgin USA even, and then they rebranded a little bit.
It was later that they rebranded to Virgin America. So Branson sells 75% of the company to a couple hedge funds.
And licenses the Virgin brand to Virgin America. So that Virgin America doesn't even own Virgin that's painted on their own airplanes.
Yep. And there was talk at various points in time about ditching Virgin, the name. Would that help get regulatory approval earlier, faster? Craziness. Anyway, they finally clear all the regulatory hurdles. They buy some aircraft. They start operations in San Francisco with SFO as their hub. They launch in 2007. Things go fairly well. They don't die, at least, like a lot of startup airlines, and they actually have some major kind of technology related innovations. So in 2009, Virgin actually becomes the first airline to offer GoGo in-flight wireless, in-flight Wi-Fi, which is now it's hard to imagine now. Taking
as Louis C.K. says, is magic and is the newest thing I know that exists.
I hate it when now the random, rare times when you end up on a plane without Wi-Fi.
Sorry.
They also are the first airline to install in-flight seat back interactive touchscreene for everybody all throughout the whole plane.
Not to mention purple afterglow lighting.
Not to mention nightclub inspired mood lighting. For our listeners who haven't flown Virgin America, they're probably gonna have no idea what we're talking about. But
yeah, I guess it's a pretty West Coast. I think anybody listening in the Bay Area has definitely flown it since they're hubbed out of SFO. But.
So the Virgin actually ends up going public, having an IPO in November 2014. And then not that long later, we're about 18 months since then, a bidding war erupts for the company between Alaska, which ended up buying them, and had been rumored to be interested in the company in Virgin for a long time, and JetBlue. And then Monday morning, April 4th, Alaska announces that they have agreed to acquire Virgin for $2.6 billion. Which was a 47% premium to the Virgin stock's closing price the previous Friday, and about an 80% premium to where the stock was before rumors came out that a bidding war was happening.
Yeah, and this is the first red flag for me. I mean, I think that
basically a massive premium.
Yeah. Anytime you see a spike like that, you start to dig into why, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about kind of the way the industry has shifted, but with all the consolidation, the only way that an airline can really compete with the big guys is to be big themselves, and the big guys being United, Delta, American, and Southwest. And so,
which itself started as a little guy.
Very true. I think that's like the typical low end disruption case study.
Yep.
And they're really, that's a great business and a really interesting story on its own.
Yep.
But I mean that clearly Alaska in trying to compete, there's a limited number of airlines that it could buy, and JetBlue clearly identified the same opportunity, and the result is this very, very inflated purchase.
Yep. So when the dust clears and all is said and done, basically the total enterprise value of the deal ends up being about $4 billion if you include the debt and the aircraft leases that Virgin had. Which
is fascinating because normally when we talk about these acquisitions, we would say, $2.6 billion purchase, in cash and stock, or maybe an all stock deal. This was an all cash $2.6 billion purchase, plus taking on that $1.4 billion of leases on airplanes and debt. And what a ridiculous capital intensive, high fixed cost industry air travel is.
That's 4 Instagram spend.
Wild.
And then perhaps the craziest part about this deal is, again, relative to the technology sector. So it was announced a couple weeks ago on April 4th, 2016. Not expected to close until early 2017 at the latest. huge amount of regulatory review that still has to happen here.
And we've actually seen precedent, I think in the American Airlines US Air merger, where there was regulatory troubles and it almost didn't go through.
And the government extracted huge concessions from those two airlines when they merged.
So we may be doing a follow-up at some point in the future if by 2017 we don't see a joined airline here.
And our listeners don't revolt against us for talking about airlines.
It's true. Well, the other really interesting thing here is in just talking about the deal price, Alaska Airlines does not have $2.6 billion in cash to make this purchase. They, if I have my numbers right, as of November of 2015, according to their earnings, they had $88 million in cash and $1.1 billion in marketable securities.
Yep.
So I believe what happened here is in the bidding war with JetBlue, Alaska has incredibly clean books. They have they're one of the few airlines that actually is investment
very low
grade.
Debt load, and actually have investment grade debt, which for listeners who come from the investment banking world, basically means that the amount of debt that Alaska has is small enough relative to its earnings power that people think it's very, very unlikely they'll go bankrupt, especially for an airline. No other airline is rated as highly, basically, which means that people who lend to them think there's a good chance they'll go bankrupt.
Yeah. So is there a chance then that the way I sort of understand it is JetBlue sort of had to cry uncle because they didn't have the amount of debt available to them.
Didn't have the borrowing power to be able to
make the purchase.
Yep. Reach this price. But now this is going to totally transform Alaska. Like they're going to take out another $1.5 billion, perhaps plus of debt.
To make to make the purchase and then to take on the debt and leases that
and Virgin was also a fairly low debt load airline as far as airlines go. But still, it's changing the capital structure of the combined company pretty significantly.
Yeah.
Great. Should we move on to acquisition category?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Why don't I start with that? Moving on to the acquisition category. This, to me, doesn't fit our mold necessarily of people, technology, product, business line, or other. I mean, I guess if everything fits in other. In some ways, it's a business line. They picked up a brand that people have tremendous affinity for and access different customers with.
That's assuming they keep the brand.
Well, yeah, and that's something we should talk about. Ultimately, though, what I think they're acquiring here is capacity. They identified the opportunity that they wanted to be the West Coast airline, and right now they don't have a meaningful presence in California. Yep. They're hubbed out of Seattle. They have very little San Francisco and even less LAX presence, and this gives them major capacity to kind of be the West Coast airline.
Yeah, basically, if you look at if you think about kind of airline route maps that you see on the back of the cards and the back of
makes your head spin, but it's super
makes
cool
your head spins, but it's usually it's like the spider web that emanates from a few major cities. The Alaska hub is Seattle, and there's a huge spider web coming out of Seattle to every country in America or to every city in America, and several international destinations, and then very few route pairs from other cities. And Virgin is the same thing, but just from SFO.
So, in your opinion, then, well, before we get into that, how would you categorize the?
I was actually we hadn't discussed this beforehand, but I was going to go down the same path you are, and say in our framework this would fit closest to a business line, kind of like buying the local San Francisco airline and you're the Seattle, the local Seattle airline, but I actually think the best categorization is this is industry consolidation, which is in a super mature old school industry like the airline industry, very different from technology. You get these periods of consolidation where players merge with each other because they feel like they need greater scale to compete, and I think that's what we're seeing happen here.
Yeah, and this is an interesting time to go into how Alaska makes the case to their investors for this. There's this great investor deck that they have on their website where they talk about why their investors should feel comfortable with this purchase. And they say that we're bullish on the industry. From 77 to 2009, the industry lost $52 billion.
I mean, the airline industry is notorious for.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we should talk about. There's a great. I almost included this as my carve out for the week, but I'm going to do something else because I knew we'd talk about it on the episode. There's a great paper that was written by Michael Malbison and his team, who's a great investor. He was head of Legg Mason, which is a large mutual fund, and at Credit Suisse for a long time. And I believe he's now back at Credit Suisse. He's written a number of great books. He's also a professor at Columbia Business School, I believe. And he wrote this great paper called Measuring the Moat. And it's all about the concept of the moat, as an investor is sort of the most important thing. Warren Buffett emphasized, and Berkshire Hathaway and Charlie Munger, emphasized the moat as sort of the most important thing they look for. And he uses the airline industry as an example of a terrible industry that has destroyed so much economic value and has no moat.
Yeah, and this is I'm not sure if I think this is still true. It was at least true a couple of years ago. If you look at the airline industry since its inception and you look at basically a profit and loss statement for an aggregate of every single airline, it's lost value. Like it's actually been it's actually not been profitable if you look at every
the entire
single
industry. Yeah. And not just lost value, but lost a huge amount of value. A huge amount of capital has been destroyed in this industry.
So when they say that 77 to 2009, they've lost $52 billion as an industry, it is interesting that people continue to invest in it. Yet from 2010 to 2015, over the last 6 years, it's
It's
generated
been good times in the airline industry.
Yes, $45 billion of value. And so some of the things they cite are, or Alaska cites to their investors, are a fundamentally changed industry structure. And that, I think, is largely, when you look at the consolidation that's going on, they're basically saying, okay, the fragmentation's gone, and right now the industry structure is that there's 4 relatively perfect substitutes, and these big ones that are all, you're going to get treated sort of like cattle when you're in coach.
And you've seen in the past few years, I believe the first was United and Continental merged. You've seen all the major legacy domestic airlines consolidate and merge, and then US Air and American merged. And so you've got this consolidating power structure of the industry that actually represents, between the top 4 airlines, 80% of all US domestic airline traffic.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I went and grabbed all their market caps today. Highest right now is Southwest is a $30 billion company. Delta's higher at $36 billion. Southwest at 30, American at 25, United at 21. And then if you look at Alaska is $10 billion without Virgin. Virgin's 2.5 and JetBlue at 7. So if you just look at those players, $132 billion effectively market cap for the industry. And when you think about like Apple as a $590 billion market cap company, you start to understand like, wow, the whole industry here is, if we were looking at this, any given airline and comparing it against one of these mega technology companies that we usually talk about on the show, like airline companies just don't create that much value.
Yeah.
Or maybe more accurately, they don't capture that much value.
Yeah. And it's super interesting. I'm sure we'll get into throughout the show, the supply chain of the airline industry is fascinating. You've got basically a duopoly that are direct suppliers to the airlines in Boeing and Airbus that make the big passenger jets, and they have a huge amount of power over the airlines because while there is 2 of them, you could go from one to the other. It's not like you can say it's not like the airlines can be like a Google and be like, oh, we're gonna become a full stack company. We're just gonna obsolete you and we're gonna make our own cloud or whatever. Like the airlines can't make their own airplanes.
Yeah, getting good at servers is different than getting good at airplanes.
Yeah.
All right, listeners, now is a great time to tell you about a longtime friend of the show, Vanta. AI has scrambled the whole security picture. It used to be that you proved that you were secure once a year, an audit or a static PDF, then everyone would nod and you're done. But in an AI-first world, that doesn't hold up anymore.
Yep, your risk surface changes every week now. A vendor turns on an AI feature or someone writes in a new model without telling IT, and your posture is different than it was last week, let alone at your last audit. Vanta's own research found that around 70% of companies have this quote unquote shadow AI running with no security review at all.
Right. And that's where Vanta comes in. They're the leading agentic trust platform, meaning they've built the thing that closes the gap. And the way that they close that gap is Vanta Agent. Think of it as a GRC engineer, that's governance, risk, and compliance, except that it's software and it doesn't sleep. It finds the issues, drafts the fixes, and cuts the time that you'd spend on vendor assessments in half.
In half! Which is exactly why more than 16,000 companies today run on Vanta. Companies like Ramp, Cursor, and Snowflake all stay audit ready and catch the risks that crop up between audits across every vendor, every AI tool, the whole environment.
And that's the real value. Trust has to be continuous now, which is why Vanta automates your security, your compliance, and the work to earn and prove trust. We're huge fans of Vanta over here, and literally hundreds of acquired listeners have become Vanta customers at their companies over the years. So you can get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/acquired. That's VANTA.com/acquired for $1,000 off, and just tell them that Ben and David sent you.
Getting back to the Alaska, reasons they're bullish on the industry. The industry structure is consolidated. This is sort of a BS bullet point, I think, but returns-focused leadership teams, that's sort of like tooting your own horn and claiming competency. Constrained airport real estate. This one's sort of interesting. I guess they're sort of saying, like, we've reached a saturation point right now where we're not building more airports. The airports aren't getting bigger. And over the last, since 1960, that's been the case. And now it's all about sort of vying for space at the existing airports that we have. And then the capacity acquisition starts to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, there are only so many gates.
Right. Growth in leisure travel, which is interesting to sort of pick apart and think about why that might be. And then new revenue sources. And I think we can all gripe about how we are well aware of all the revenue sources that airlines can...
charging for bags. And
food and entertainment.
I mean, some of these are new services they've added, and Virgin and Alaska have both been kind of the bleeding edge here of doing flight Wi-Fi and entertainment and movies and snacks that are actually edible.
And co-branded with Tom Douglas. So it's always so funny to get on those planes and see how far, for those of you not from Seattle, he's sort of like the big restaurateur in town, to see how far he's leveraged that brand now that I opened the little snack pamphlet on an American Airlines and there's Tom smiling at me and on the front of it.
Love it.
So artisanal. So, from a category perspective, I think, absolutely, I would chalk it up to capacity.
Yep. And the other point I want to explore here a little bit is there's a really interesting context for this deal that people in Seattle might be aware of, but I doubt anyone not here and that's that Delta actually has been putting a huge amount of pressure on Alaska here in Seattle in their hub. Delta has been growing over the last few years their presence in Seattle a lot, and for a long time I think Alaska was probably concerned or expecting that Delta was going to make an offer to buy them, and they haven't. Instead, they've just organically grown and taken more and more gates here in Seattle, and it's really interesting. I was talking to somebody who is far more of an airline industry expert than we are, and he was making the point that the frame of reference is really different for these two companies, Delta and Alaska. Alaska is a domestic carrier and it's a West Coast focused carrier. Delta is an international carrier, and Delta coming into Seattle was part about competing with Alaska domestically because Alaska's built a really nice business here, but also an even bigger part probably for Delta is using Seattle as a gateway for international flights to Asia, because gate real estate, as you were saying, Ben, is so scarce, and at the other big cities on the West Coast, at SFO and at LAX, is so competitive and impossible to get more real estate there. I think Delta really viewed Seattle as kind of their gateway so that they could send people from all over the U.S. on flights to Seattle and then hop over to Japan, to Korea, to China, to what have you.
Makes sense.
Whereas for Alaska, that's not even an accessible market to them right now.
Right. In looking at this acquisition category and the kind of the way we've both defined it, in a $2.6 billion sale, that it seems inflated for two reasons. One, kind of the bidding war, because there was scarcity of good airlines to buy that would complement JetBlue or Alaska well. But two, a lot of the value, the kind of intrinsic value that was given to Virgin even before rumors of a sale was brand value.
Yeah.
I mean, they have tremendous customer affinity. They do things a little bit differently.
People who love Virgin love Virgin.
I always have
And
a better
people who
experience.
love Alaska too.
It's true. But actually, those are two of my favorite airlines to fly. But Virgin is like notoriously different and better and feels premium, and that had to be factored into their market cap. And when you think about what they are going to be used for, I mean, Alaska announced that by 2018 they hope to be fully rebranded as Alaska. Hopefully they can learn some things from Virgin, and they've been watching them very carefully. But if they obliterate that brand, what was the point of paying a markup on a markup for capacity?
Yeah, it's a great point. The Alaska brand, again, it was very good, especially in the airline industry on its own. I think, really was kind of like very professional. They had either the best in the industry or the best on the West Coast on time percentage. Lots of great, very, very business commuter friendly. And Virgin was like we joked earlier, like a nightclub on a plane. Lots of, it was the favored airline of all me and all my classmates when we were in business school, and we can leave it at that.
So then, one other thing that I want to bring up in that realm is payback period. So they cite Alaska cites that, they'll have $225 million of total net synergies at full integration. So what we can pull from that is that there will be $225 million of cost savings after they're fully integrated. So let's call that, 2018-ish. And that means that there's probably other value that they can create on top of that, like ability to create more revenue because they have these economies of scale, new things just on top of that. But that means that they have on this, if we look at the $4 billion as the figure, that's a 17-year payback period on this acquisition, just on the synergies. And, do we think that...
Now, Virgin had earnings as well that would contribute to that, but 2 points I want to make, but go ahead.
Yeah. No, go for it. I've pretty much made the point that, like, it seems like it's going to take a while to recoup the value.
Any way you slice it, it's going to take a while. And I think there are two really head-scratching things about this merger that are really important, that some certainly industry experts are questioning, but Alaska hasn't talked a lot about. One, the primary reason for the sort of economic renaissance of airlines in the last couple of years has been falling fuel prices.
Yeah, which are only nominally passed on to consumers, and everyone's getting a little...
Right. And so airlines as a whole, across the whole industry, have gone from, call it spending X on fuel, which was a huge amount of their operating budget and kept their margins, low to negative, to spending like X divided by 2 on fuel. And thus they are enjoying, as an industry, much greater profits than they used to. Now, the question is, like, is that a new normal, or like, are oil prices going to go back up at some point? And, we could do another show on the oil and gas industry, and this is a major existential question for that whole industry. But if you were to take the viewpoint that, like, this is a temporary thing and prices will go back up, which historically they have, fluctuated throughout history, gosh, it seems like you're buying at the top of the market here where profits are artificially inflated. So that's one. two, you know, synergies, as you rightly mentioned, Ben, are you know, often about the combined revenue potential and real, you know, and being able to extract more money from consumers and routes and whatnot. But they're also really about cost savings.
Yeah.
And
consolidating the back
and
office.
consolidate and economies of scale and all that front. But there's kind of a problem here with this acquisition, and that's that Alaska flies Boeing planes and Virgin flies Airbus planes.
Exclusively Airbus. Their
Yeah,
entire
Alaska
fleet.
only flies Boeing and Virgin only flies Airbus. And you might say, as a naive consumer, as I did before I started looking into this, like, no big deal. I mean, like, they look like it's a plane. A plane is a plane, right? Like, I get on it, it looks the same. Well, it turns out that actually they have completely different control systems, and pilots who fly Boeing planes can't fly Airbus planes, and pilots who fly Airbus planes can't fly Boeing planes.
So it's not like they're going to be able to share pilots at all between these fleets.
Not going to be able to share pilots. And of course, all the maintenance and all the parts are completely different. Now, there are the other major airlines do use a mixed fleet of both.
Except for Southwest.
Except for Southwest, yes. But
So Southwest is entirely Boeing 737s because they realized that a part of their business model was going to be staying as lean as possible and
Yep.
keeping everything totally interchangeable and swappable.
And that's actually been a big part of their story to Wall Street and investors, you know, about why they're a great company. That's been kind of a pillar of it. And Alaska had the same playbook. And now all of a sudden, they're like a 50-50 shop of, you know, Airbus and Boeing.
Yeah, and you know, from a heartstrings perspective too, how dare a Seattle company buy a company that's entirely Airbus planes? That's just not patriotic.
Oh, much sordid and painful history on Seattle and Boeing, and perhaps for another show.
Yeah. So
yeah, and I think that kind of actually segs into what usually is a short segment for us, and I think we'll also probably be short here of what would have happened otherwise. And here, clearly, the otherwise, I mean, Virgin was going to be acquired, and the otherwise was JetBlue had acquired them. Now, JetBlue is also an Airbus company, so would have been a lot easier for them to realize cost synergies.
yeah, and there's two points I want to make here. One, Virgin is sort of only recently profitable. I think that, so they launched in 2007,
Yep.
took them 3 years to have their first profitable quarter. They're struggling as pitching themselves as both a low cost airline and an airline that has a really premium service.
Yep.
And I think that they were better at adhering to the premium service than they were to the low cost, but that's a tough story to sell to consumers. And I think they were struggling with, you know, how to be both, because you can't both be a Volvo and a Cadillac and have that story be, you know, sustainable and enduring. And so I think that, you know, Virgin didn't necessarily need to sell. They were definitely in the right place, right time, where they had exactly what
They got an 80% premium to their
yeah.
pre-acquisition share price. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Good on them for their M&A positioning. But, you know, that seems like a little bit of a precarious position. And as you know, at Pioneer Square Labs, a lot when we're thinking about starting these companies, I think I would get a lot of crazy looks if I was like, well, we're going to be a low cost premium company.
It reminds me of, I've been reading another, could have potentially been my Carve Out, but won't be. I've been listening on audiobook to a great book called Business Adventures. It's a classic. It's from, I believe it was written in either in the 70s, perhaps. It was recommended to me by a good friend, and I've been listening to it, and it's 10 vignettes of like more aptly titled business misadventures. The first one is about a stock market crash in the 60s, but the second one that I'm listening to now is about the Edsel, the car that Ford launched that's like widely considered like the worst product launch in history. And one of the key lessons from it is that like Ford wanted the Edsel to be everything to everyone. Like they say, like, you know, daringly adventurous with a dash of conservatism, you know, and it's like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, you know, you know, for the, it's elegant, luxury for the aspiring, young executive, and affordable for like the middle market. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
And it failed spectacularly.
Yeah. I'm not over here preaching that was going to be Virgin's path, but that was always sort of a head scratcher to me about that company. Now, the question that I want to pose to you is, what would have happened to Alaska with all the consolidation in the market going on and kind of moving to four major players, the pressure from Delta on the home front? What if they don't expand?
Yeah, and I think this, to give some credit to Alaska, I feel like we've been sort of taking pot shots at this deal. They were in a tough position, I think. Doing well in the moment, but facing this pressure from Delta, this consolidation across the whole industry, and they had developed a really, really nice niche here in Seattle as the by far the best routes and customer service for people who live in Seattle and fly in and out of SeaTac, but great business routes. But they kind of had nowhere to go. They were getting pressure from Delta here. It was super hard for them. What are they going to do? Expand internationally? Are they going to go to other cities? And that's what they did with this. They said, we kind of need to grow. It's going to be super hard to do organically. Here's an opportunity. We have a great balance sheet, and for an airline, a lot of cash. We know we're relative to the industry pretty well run. Here's an opportunity to buy Virgin and basically double our size and run the same playbook again. Or they could have just stayed in sort of steady state where they are.
Well, it's funny. You would hope that they double their market size because the acquisition is so expensive. But when you look at the numbers of what Alaska's doing and what Virgin's doing, Alaska has 32 million total passengers a year. Virgin has 7. Alaska has 1,000 departures a day. Virgin has 200. There's 112 destinations served by Alaska. Virgin has 24. Pre-tax profit from Alaska, $1.3 billion. Virgin, $200 million. So, that is an expensive purchase for a much, much smaller operation.
Yep. And a much smaller operation with no room to grow in San Francisco.
Yeah.
I mean, not just SFO, but the other airports in the Bay Area too, Oakland and San Jose, which are different. They're really commuter airports. Although, pro tip for Seattle to Bay Area commuters, never fly to SFO. You always got to do Oakland or San Jose. Because if you do at SFO, there's so much fog and fog delays, and they always delay the Seattle flights because they want the cross-country flights to land on time. Got to do Oakland or San Jose.
Pro tip.
Anyway, but there's no room to expand at any of these airports.
Yeah.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to thank our longtime friend of the show, ServiceNow. If you are running a large enterprise, AI agents are likely spread across every team, and deploying them is no longer the hard part.
Yeah. The hard part is knowing what permissions they have, what employees are using them for, or what decisions AI is making. AI security for an enterprise at scale is not a small concern. The risks are real.
Exactly. And the challenge with AI is governing it, securing it, measuring it, and making sure that it actually delivers value. That is why ServiceNow built the AI Control Tower.
Yep. AI Control Tower gives enterprises a single place to see, manage, govern, and optimize AI across the entire business. And it works with any AI, not just theirs. Every device on your network, every permission across every system, every AI agent visible and secure in one place.
And ServiceNow can do this because they've spent more than 20 years building the operational backbone of the enterprise, the workflows, governance, approvals, security controls, and institutional knowledge that power how work actually gets done across IT, HR, customer service, finance, and security.
ServiceNow already runs more than 100 billion workflows annually and trillions of transactions for more than 85% of the Fortune 500. So when companies need a place to govern AI at enterprise scale, they're building on a platform at the center of how their business already operates.
And in a future that isn't going to be one AI, it's going to be thousands of AI agents working across every function of the company. But the question is, who's managing them all?
So if you're trying to turn AI ambition into real business outcomes and make it work safely, securely, at scale, go check out servicenow.com/acquired and tell them that Ben and David sent you.
All right, let's move on to our next section. what tech themes does this illustrate for you?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. I debated a lot of ideas here, and it's ironic because this is not a technology acquisition. But I'm going to go with niche marketing. Again, even though we've been taking pot shots against this deal, both Virgin and Alaska before the merger really succeeded at this. Like in a crowded marketplace with lots of big platform players in the big national carriers, they found a niche. Alaska here in Seattle and with business travelers, and Virgin in San Francisco with, sort of quality of service and sort of style-minded customers. And they served it really, really well. And they grew very big businesses out of that. I mean, combined, obviously the price for Virgin at $2.6 billion. And I can't remember, what was Alaska's market cap before?
So their stock actually went down on announcing the acquisition. It's about $10 billion now.
About $10 billion. These are great businesses. And I think that same principle totally applies in technology, and people, especially startups, often overlook it. Like they try and go after, the Delta or the United or the Southwest on day one. They try and go after, Google on day one. You're not going to beat Google on day one. The way you're going to beat Google down the road is you start with a small audience, a small niche of people who love you passionately, and then you grow from there. And then you knock down, in crossing the chasm speak, the next bowling pin and the next bowling pin and the next bowling pin. And that's much easier to do in technology than it is in airlines. But the great thing about it is that, you're probably not going to become the next Facebook or Google. But if you knock down a couple bowling pins along the way, you're still going to become a really great and valuable company. And then maybe you get a chance to knock them all down and you will become the next, you will be Snapchat and become the next Facebook. Yeah. Calling it here.
There you go. That's a good point.
Does that analogy also kind of apply to the brand loyalty aspect of airlines? Which they've, huge innovation.
Yeah, they invented loyalty.
In the inventing, the loyalty and the airline miles and status.
Yeah. So you're postulating that they're, in order to
are
capitalize on
there
loyalty,
technology companies that have, probably not enough, there should be more, but that have taken that sort of loyalty aspect where, like, the more I use a platform, the deeper I get locked in because the more, airline miles I have on it, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I think that everybody that has like done well at loyalty in the last 50 years has taken it from airlines. The question is, like, do you need to?
OpenTable definitely did.
Yeah.
Quite successfely.
Yeah. I guess I'm wondering, do you need to?
That would be a great acquisition to cover at some point.
OpenTable?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll add it to the list. I'm trying to think about, like, is it necessary? Has something changed in the world where it's necessary to consolidate to keep loyalty? Because, like, does something exist now that didn't exist before where people only ever want to use one airline? Or,
I mean, that's definitely the case in technology. Like, I think about, the power law and the power of network effects, like HipChat, right? Like 2 years ago, a bunch of our portfolio companies used HipChat, and some of them used Slack, and some of them used HipChat. And they would, I'd talk to people using HipChat and be like, you should really check out Slack. And they'd be like, we use HipChat, like, it's good enough. But then, like, as their friends at other companies got on Slack, and then Slack channels started popping up for, industry groups and whatnot. And then it was like, well, we should really think about moving to Slack. And, like, then, this power law takes over, and being on, even if, I think Slack has done a lot of great product innovations, but even if they hadn't, you would be pushed to move towards it, even if you're on HipChat, because the rest of the world is on it.
Yeah, and with Slack, I think that the, like, network effect was because people were starting inter-company Slacks. So you would end up with like, I'm in this Slack that's like a social thing or an industry thing. And then it was like, I'm not going to keep using two separate applications. So, like, does that apply here where, I'm not going to maintain points at two separate loyalty programs, because that was always super annoying. I mean, there was a few startups that I was trying out that were trying to aggregate my loyalty programs for me, or at least help me keep track. And that was a kind of total pain. But to segue off of aggregator onto another technology trend, let's see if this. Let me think through this and see if this logic kind of follows. So sites like Kayak and Hitmonk and all these, Travelocity, Priceline, travel aggregators pop up.
Yep.
And that's 15, 20 years ago. And that effectively commoditizes airlines and compresses their margins because people's loyalty to those airlines is shaken because they have an easy way to find cheaper prices.
Mm-hmm, to price compare,
so therefore margins are driven down because airlines get more commoditized, and when they're more commoditized and there's less profit to be had, even though they weren't making a lot of profit before, they need to consolidate to create a cheaper back office to take advantage of economies of scale. And now if you're a smaller airline, the inefficiencies from you having a smaller operation could kill you. And so if you follow it all the way back to the online travel aggregators, does that sort of create the environment in which you need to have a bidding war for this acquisition so that you can be a more major player in a consolidated market?
It's interesting. It feels a little bit, it's different because it hasn't fully become a digitized industry, but it's reminiscent of Ben Thompson's aggregation theory, right? Where aggregating the consumer endpoint and experience, he argues, in the digital 21st century, post-internet world, is where all the value is, and then you can aggregate all the difficult, content creation behind that content creation, he says, but in this case, airlines, like point-to-point travel, and own that relationship with the customer at the front end, and then you commoditize everything on the back end, and that's completely happened. And interesting, Southwest, has refused to participate in the aggregators to let themselves be aggregated, and probably has some of the most loyal customers. Their ticker symbol is love, LUV, right? And they always talk about how much everybody loves each other at Southwest. They've fought that actively and have probably had the most success on the branding front.
Yeah. Well, why don't we move on to rendering our conclusions?
I think it's that time.
Yeah. And I think we've kind of expressed our opinions laced in a bunch of comments throughout this. For me, I think the value is inflated, both by the bidding war and by the fact that they bought something that had brand built into the market cap when they're not necessarily going to leverage, and in fact have announced they're not going to leverage that brand. But I think they needed to. And I don't think they had a lot of options, and I think they both picked the time right when this was an available purchase, and they put themselves in a really good position to make that purchase by, I'm probably the wrong person to talk about this, but by putting their books in a great position over the last 5 years and being really intentional about having or being an investment grade or having investment grade credit. And, I think that JetBlue didn't prioritize that as much, and neither did any of the other smaller airlines. And in a world where they need to consolidate, they put themselves in a position where they're able to do so. So I'll give it a B-.
Yep. It's hard to separate out, just, at least for me, this sort of coming from the tech industry, this sort of shock at looking at the terrible economics of the airline industry as a whole and dynamics, versus the actual quality of decision making in this acquisition. So I think a lot of what you said I agree with, but I'm going to go lower. I'm going to go C-, because what you said is right, but they paid so much money. They paid so much money. I don't think it's public, and I don't know that anybody except the executives involved know what Alaska's initial bid for Virgin was, but like it got bid up so many times until like, ooh, that's a large price for something that your pilots can't fly.
Can an airline make a good purchase?
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Yeah.
All right, should we move on to the Carve Out?
Yeah, so this is wild. Like I was like stopping myself from laughing, and my jaw dropped, and I think it almost ruined David's train of thought earlier when he started talking about how it wasn't going to be his Carve Out, but it was a paper that Michael, is it Malbison?
Malbison.
That Michael Malbison wrote about this. I picked my Carve Out as a Michael Malbison talk that he gave at Google.
Oh, this is so good. Everybody should watch this talk. It's really good.
And this, David, this is so weird. I haven't watched this in probably 2 years. And it was something that I've recommended to friends very often. And so I was sitting here before the episode thinking, I didn't see anything particularly interesting this week that I wanted to recommend, but how about an oldie but goodie? And it is absolutely wild that
this talk is great. And it's based on a book that I've read the book too, which is worth reading too, called Untangling Luck and Skill.
Yep. Untangling Skill and Luck, the Success Equation. And it is so fascinating. He gives so many great examples that will make you both follow it logically and nod your head, and sort of scared about how much of your own success has been out of your control, or how much the world is out of our control. So how much of your own success cannot be attributed to you, and how much of your own failure cannot be attributed to you, and trying to figure out what are things that you have
attributed to your own skill.
Yes. And what are things that, you actually should be focusing on, and what are things that you should know that there's going to be randomness in the world.
It's the talk. If you only have an hour, listen to the talk. If you really want to go deep on this, get the book. It's so good. I will restrain myself. I could go in so many directions, but one real quick vignette I want to throw out is one of my favorite themes from this talk and book is the paradox of skill, which is such a cool thing that, like, in a given activity, the whole premise of the talk in the book is that any activity, the results of which are going to be based somewhat on the skill of the participants in the activity and somewhat on luck. And there's a spectrum, and some things go more towards the luck end and some towards the skill end. The paradox of skill is that even in things that are highly skill based, as the level of play gets higher, so imagine the example Malbison uses is basketball. As basketball, which is very skill based, as the level of play gets higher and higher, and the parity of skill amongst the players gets more and more uniform, then luck plays an increasing role in the outcome, even though it's a skill-based game.
Particularly due to globalization, because the only people who are even considered for this are the best in the world. Yep. So then it's like, well, among the people that are all the best that look very similar to each other in skill level,
the variation in skill gets so minute
that luck is magnified.
Luck is magnified. Yeah, super. And the exact same dynamic holds true in investing, in startups, in lots of things.
When the world is the pool, you always have the cream of the crop, and then it's all about all the crazy dynamics that play out from there. So can't recommend it enough. It's on YouTube. We'll link it in the show notes. Definitely check out The Success Equation, Untangling Skill and Luck.
I've taken enough time. I'm going to save mine for another time. It wasn't super interesting anyway. Well, I'm going to doubly recommend this. It's so good.
All right. Well, there you have it.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to talk about one of our favorite companies, Statsig.
Yes, longtime acquired partner. There is a reason why the best product teams at companies like OpenAI and Notion, Atlassian, Figma, Rippling, Brex, and more rely on Statsig, whether they are iterating on their core product features or shipping AI-powered experiences at scale.
Yep. In the crazy speed of today's AI world, shipping fast is just table stakes now. It's basically trivial to build and deploy your app constantly. The real advantage is how quickly you learn what changes actually created value for customers, and how fast you can use that signal to guide what you ship next. Whether it's a feature tweak, a pricing change, a performance improvement, or an AI update like a model change or prompt adjustment, they're not relying on instinct. They're measuring what actually moved engagement, retention, and ultimately revenue. And as more teams build with AI, that learning loop becomes even more important. Building with LLMs introduces non-determinism into your product experience. The same input doesn't always produce the same output, and behavior can shift in subtle ways in real-world use.
So doing offline evals will give you part of the picture, but you can really only understand the impact once your product is live with real users, and then you can measure how their behavior actually changes. It's very different than the way that you would ship features in a pre-AI world where you knew exactly what the software was going to do in production.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is where StatSig comes in. It brings experimentation, feature flags, and product analytics into one unified system so teams can ship safely, test rigorously, and directly link what they changed to how users actually behaved. The result is a tighter feedback loop and learning that compounds over time, so you don't just ship more, you ship better.
So if you want to make learning your competitive advantage, whether you're building new AI experiences or just evolving your existing core product, go to statsig.com/acquired to get started.
Thanks for listening today. Again, if you have the time, please leave us a review on iTunes. Can't say enough how much it's important to the success of the show, and we love your feedback. So,
and if you want to receive episodes by email going forward, just sign up on acquired.fm, and we will. We're also now going to start publishing the show by email updates as well, if you prefer that channel.
It's true, and you can give us feedback on the website or acquiredfm@gmail.com. See you later, everyone.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Who got the truth now? Huh?